at you. A few years back, some of our South Jersey municipalities, as many of you know, pushed back on the idea of their residents raising backyard chickens. Since the pandemic, more and more of our towns, however, have realized the benefits of those chicken programs, including food waste reduction and insect control. With that in mind, it's my personal pleasure to welcome Tri-County royalty, the Chicken Lady of South Jersey, the ace of the green teams, and a Haddon Township resident, Gwenne Baile. Hey, Gwen, what's new in chicken ordinances?
Well, I have to say that chicken ordinances are alive and well in South Jersey. And as you said, quite a few towns did actually change their ordinance during the pandemic. So we keep growing. And to my knowledge, and I do make it a habit of trying to check with someone from each of the towns once a year to see how the programs are going, that there just aren't problems. And I'm really, really pleased about that. And I do think that there are some reasons why there aren't problems. I think that the ordinances that have been written, whether it was initially for a pilot program or whether it went straight to ordinance and skipped pilots, which most recently quite a few towns have done, have really been successful because everybody that wants to get a license normally has to take a class. And I think it does help to weed out those on the fence that may not wind up being very good for the pilot program or for whatever the ordinance, because they just aren't committed. So it kind of weeds them out, and it really covers everything that they need to know, not only for the health of their hens, but for the health of the neighborhood and to keep the neighbors happy. So we're keep moving on with that. I like to share my screen if possible. I have a list of wherever it was. There it is. Okay, so this just kind of goes through some of the towns, and as of this point, and I think the main reason that my nickname is the Chicken Lady of South Jersey, I have helped 28 towns change their law in some form or another. Some I have been very, very, very closely involved with, meeting several times with the grassroots groups, coming up with an ordinance or a pilot program that they feel would really help them. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to go down on this. Anyway, and other ones that I did more from kind of, here's all of our stuff, here's a list of things that you can be doing and working on to help get this passed. And so it's been very, very rewarding. And I do have to say, as horrible as the pandemic has been, just the whole idea that I was able to go to Zoom meetings in North Jersey. I've actually helped a couple towns up there. I had a very, very wonderful experience with Tinton Falls in Monmouth County. They actually gave me a whole hour to just do a presentation to their entire council, which was pretty phenomenal. And 2 towns in Pennsylvania. So it's let me do a lot more than just focus. But basically, the majority of the ones that I have worked on are from the Tri-County area. And you may remember, for some of you who do know me, it actually took me 5 years in Haddon Township from the time I decided that I wanted to have backyard hens and found out that they were totally banned. And a brief bit of history is a lot of the laws changed right after World War II, where everybody wanted the white picket fences and farmers were looked down on. So most of the towns either totally banned all forms of, quote, livestock or farm animals, or developed ordinances that said you had to have 5 acres, 10 acres, 30 acres to have any chickens, whether you wanted 2 or 20,000. And that's how they were for all that time. So it took a lot of time, a lot of effort, educating myself, taking every class I could possibly imagine about backyard chickens online, and being able to stand up in front of council and argue the point and be patient. And they learned I wasn't going to go away. So in August of 2015, we got our first 1-year pilot. And most of the towns now are doing 2-year pilots. If I knew then what I know now, I would have done that as well. From then on, it just took off. And even then, some of the towns took months and months, year, to change anything. And probably one of the biggest success stories was Voorhees, where it really literally took about 2.5 months to get an ordinance passed from the first time it was introduced till it was totally passed. They skipped a pilot. And so the most recent one, which I think is really fascinating, is Tavistock. I don't know if any of you knew that. Tavistock is a tiny little offshoot of, I don't know, 7, 8 houses or something that grew out of Haddonfield years ago, mainly because of blue ordinances. They have the country club and they wanted to be able to serve alcohol. And Haddonfield was a dry town. So they developed their own tiny town around the country club. So it's very exclusive. So Haddonfield itself, it'll be a year, a couple days after Christmas this year, that they created an ordinance. They skipped a pilot. And then Tavistock decided that they would do their own. And the funny thing is that their ordinance actually allows 10 homes to have a license to have chickens. And I don't even think they have 10 homes in their town. But to me, that's like so cool to say the entire town is allowed to have chickens and can get licenses. And wouldn't that be great if it was every town that everybody could get a license and whatever. So also interesting towns, we had gotten it passed in Voorhees. As I said, they went straight to ordinance. And most recently, besides Tavistock and Haddonfield, National Park and Runnymede changed their laws. So there's still some out there that, to be honest, I don't think unless the current administration leaves that particular town will ever change their ordinance, which doesn't make sense to me at all. We have so much data, so many towns doing this, up to 28, 29 towns here without problems, that it just doesn't make any sense to me any longer that why would your town not be successful? I think if I was a resident of one of those towns, I'd really take it personally because people are doing this right all across all levels: education, house value, home values, size of towns. It just doesn't seem to make any difference. We have had success in one town in all 3 counties, Delran and Monroe and Voorhees, all actually had a law where people, if that technically had a real farm, were allowed to have chickens. But we weren't talking about farms. And once they finally got it into their head that no, we weren't talking about farms, we're talking about the backyard. So we don't care if the farmer's doing everything right, following the guidelines for waste disposal and everything else that might be involved with them having a lot more than 4 hens. And once they got that idea out of their mind that we were focusing on the backyards, then we were able to do that. So they don't have to take my class if they're a farmer, but if you want a license to have chickens in your backyard, it's a whole different deal. Obviously, making sure that you're keeping them extra clean. We don't want any complaints from neighbors, that you're taking good care of your hens. Everything's predator proof. And also predator proof to the point where they're not going to get into the neighbor's yard, because that's just not going to work. People are not going to be happy if that's the case. So unfortunately, I can't figure out how to go down here to show you the rest of them, but I pretty much said all the most recent ones. A couple of things that people need to know if you don't know if it's legal in your town. You can always go to eCode New Jersey or eCode 360 New Jersey. And I know that Sean was going to put that in the chat room, and then / whatever town you live in. And normally just looking up the word fowl or poultry is enough to tell you what the law is. But you may not find anything, and that doesn't mean it's okay. I know that there's not only Cherry Hill, but there's a couple other towns I've run into where if it doesn't say you can do something in their law, it means you can't. So Cherry Hill does not say that you cannot have chickens. It doesn't say anything, therefore you can't. It would have to actually say, yes, chickens are permitted on whatever, however they're going to do that and make a law. So I do know lots and lots of people in lots and lots of towns that are raising chickens illegally, and you don't want to be me. because I get so many emails. I got a summons because somebody reported me and my chickens. Can you help me change the law? Now, they're not going to fall for changing the law after the fact. Before you get chickens is the time to change the law. You're really taking chances that you're not going to be reported. And most of the time you have to rehome your hens. You may even have a fine. So that's not the way to do it. Now, one case, and we could always try this, and it was actually Woodbury, where somebody had chickens and they came up with something called exhaustion of remedies. It's a legal term where pretty much it said that the town wouldn't make them get rid of the chickens and they wouldn't do anything like sue the town until they could work it out and see whether they could change the law. And that's what happened. The law changed. They had a pilot, a really nice pilot, turned into a law, and nothing ever happened to the person that really was the star of trying to get the chickens changed in Woodbury. But that's the only town that I know of that it worked. Also, people will say, well, I have an autistic child and the chicken, they love the chickens and this and that. And where that can be true, most of the time the town councils are too smart. They're not going to do anything because of that. They're not going to let you have chickens, because in order to do that, ideally, you would have to have letters from the child's doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist, saying that this is a good thing before you get chickens, not after the fact. So I do think that the safest, easiest way is to try to do it, to try to change the law, to see, get a grassroots group going. They're not going to change the law for one person, costs towns money. And you have to be aware of that. And the other thing that I really, really like, and a lot of towns have accepted it and some don't, and they're not like all carbon copies of the Haddon Township Ordinance, which I do think is pretty much the best ordinance, but that's me. We have what's called a backyard chicken advisory board, and it was actually my mayor's idea, because number one, it decreases costs to the town, and we all know how important that is in this day and age. So that we need to do what we can do to kind of get away from the idea of towns running things. So in a sense, we're a little bit more like the Environmental Commission or the Shade Tree Commission. We're just called a board. We're not called that. But our town, we regulate our own chicken program. We have all chicken people on it. And you would think, well, that's going to be, that you're going to let people scoot by if there's a problem. And that's not really what happens, because when we have a lot more to lose if we have somebody in the program that's really not doing it right. And that's not the case. We've been very, very fortunate. And we have an extremely successful program. We have 30 houses in Haddon Township, which is a town of roughly 15,000 people. And we've had it since 2015. So it's a very successful program. But should there be any kind of a complaint, then we would go out and try to handle the complaint. And I think the important thing there is we know what is normal. We know what isn't normal, and we can teach. And as in everything, and I do believe every moment in life is a teaching moment, that if somebody say their coop really did smell, and then you can get into a discussion with them. What are you doing? How do you clean it? What are you using to clean it? And go on and go on and educate them. If it's a town that the town's running the program, they send out the enforcement officer. Yeah, it stinks. You have a month to fix it, or you're getting rid of your chickens. Doesn't do squat. They don't know. I've even offered it even here when we first got the program. Why don't you take the class? Then you'll have some more background information. And that normally doesn't happen with councils. So at any rate, that's what we do. And we have a board of 8 people, and we're in charge of getting the programs up and running. If somebody new comes to town and needs to follow the regulations on how we get them a license and how they have to take the class and all that sort of stuff. But in the long run, it saves the town a whole lot of money. So one other thing before I close is that I have heard quite a bit of time people asking, well, can't we get a county law? Mainly because when I started this whole thing, I called it Camden County Chickens and Therapy Hens. I have nothing to do with the county per se, but sometimes people think I do. But I think it would be wonderful, but I never see that happen. And I even actually have a telephone interview with New Jersey Monitor that wants to ask more questions about a state law to allow backyard hens. And wouldn't that be wonderful? But I don't see it happening. It's almost like the same thing with states' rights versus US rights. Every town thinks they're special. Every town thinks that, you know, we don't care that it's worked in 28 towns. We don't think it'll work here and not in my backyard and all that kind of garbage that I just don't see that the whole county will make a countywide law saying that everybody should be allowed to have backyard hens and these are what the general rules should be. But I guess we should be optimistic and maybe at some point in time, just like I think at this point, people just, it's just a normal thing here in town. You know, it's not a big deal. They're very used to the whole idea and it just takes education. And I do wish that if there's any of you that have more questions or can't tell whether it's legal in your town, my email should be in the chat room. And I am tentatively actually teaching a class. I'm now affiliated with the Burlington County Ag Center. I've done a couple classes for them. And I actually am on February 26th. This is Sunday afternoon, doing a class on changing the laws in your town to legalize backyard hens. I don't know if you can register for that yet on their website, but if you're interested, that would be, we could really get into it a whole lot in more detail and things that you can be doing just as a citizen and getting a grassroots group up and running. So any questions? And otherwise I'll turn it back over to Chris.
All right, I'm going to jump in here. Just great work, Gwen. Truly impressive. And I'm proud to see Barrington's on your list. Thank you so much.